think we'll just start getting started. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. We just concluded a little 2-hour kind of think tank that had people from all different parts of the community, just about trying to identify some questions or thoughts about what's going on with the Presidential Search Committee and things that we think we could help contribute to that cause. I want to thank Jess and Cora for helping bring some of the members of the Presidential Search Committee here. For those of you who haven't been to this space before, this is, we're winding down. We're going to be out of here on Sunday and be installed by Wednesday, but Nonstop was a kind of month-long community residency that Bill May helped us get into the space to do some of the work of identifying where people are at in the community. We've been distilling a couple of different types of conversations with different constituencies under a couple of different broader headers, and we're going to be putting out kind of just a snapshot of where we think people are at in terms of what they know, what they don't know, what they want to know, how they want to be involved. And we'll continue to do that work outside of the space, and I think it's really highlighted for students and faculty and people that are here on campus that we need to kind of perpetuate some sort of space, whether it's here or elsewhere, just for the community to continue to do this type of work in and outside of the other groups that they're already a part of. So with that said, we did not, I don't know if Jess and you guys have a different idea, but we didn't set up exactly what the format of this conversation would be. What was nice at our last meeting was that we did do a go-around just so people could hear each other's names, and I don't expect everyone to know everyone because we're from all different parts of the community, but just to hear everyone see. And I imagine people will be kind of filtering in and out. I know that a number of you have to leave at 8 p.m., so let's keep that in mind as we're going on with the dialogue. If we need to get a break or run and get some more refreshments, just tap me and I'll go get some. And we kept the fan off because it's a little bit loud, but if it's hot because there's a lot of bodies in here, we could turn it back on, or we could turn the little one on. Does that sound okay? Do you want to start, Pranav?
Sure. I'm Pranav. I'm a second-year engineer. And he have pronouns.
I'm Tony. I'm also a second-year engineer.
I'm Delora. I'm a senior engineer.
Evan just graduated from architecture school.
Owen, sophomore, art.
Vincent Hoy, architecture, final year.
Carol RJ4, she.
Richard Lencher, I'm chairman of the board of trustees.
I'm Daniel, second year engineer.
Ruchi, second year engineer.
Lydia Arnold, CUA.
Robert Han, alumni trustee of architecture.
Jackson Beta, art.
Octavia Parker, first year architect.
Andy, engineer, graduate 4 years ago.
Azir, Watt, second letter.
Nadia, art, junior, she.
Marvin, art, second.
Isabel, art, second year, she.
Jay, engineering alumni, he.
Justin, I'm a fourth year engineering student.
Kevin Slavin, alumni trustee, graduate, School of Art.
Jessica Marshall, second year EE, current student rep to the board. Third year, oh my god. It's getting nuts.
Chris Curro, master's engineering, he, him.
Harrison graduated engineering last year. He.
Casey Garland, art 23 seniors.
So before we get started, I was speaking to Deborah about this, and we thought it would be best for, I guess, Rich, Robert, and Kevin to give a little bit of an overview about the Presidential Search Committee, and then just have it evolve into questions and answers. And there's a lot of us here, so if everyone could bear in mind not to completely dominate the conversation, that would be good. Otherwise, what do you guys think?
I didn't prepare anything.
That's okay.
You?
No, I don't prepare remarks. I mean, we can tell you, we're right at the beginning, so this is very timely. The search committee is in formation right now. We've identified on the board board members. It'll be comprised of myself. Let me start. It's co-chaired by Johnny Taylor and Eric Hirschman. The other trustee members are Kevin, Robert, and Jessica. So you have a graduate of each of the art, architecture, and engineering schools.
Just to let you know, Eric Hirschman is a graduate of engineering.
And, sorry, does anybody, or does everybody know who Johnny Taylor is? Is there anybody who's not familiar with his background?
I don't know.
We spoke briefly about it at the think tank, so if you want to give a brief synopsis, that would be great.
All right, because it's quite. I'm going to read just a couple things, just because it's important to know what his background is. So he's the president and CEO of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, the only national organization representing nearly 300,000 students, attending 47 public historically black colleges and universities. And comes out of industry. He was senior vice president of human resources and at IAC here in the city, and is trained as a lawyer and so on and so forth. So just to say that, never mind that he happens to be a trustee. If you, from my perspective, if we were looking for somebody to chair a committee to find the president of the agreement, I would probably pick Johnny for that, just based on his qualifications for that.
He's had a lot of experience.
This is what he does for a living is basically look for presidents of colleges. So just to say. And so when we had the first meeting of those 5 trustees that you just mentioned, we changed the composition of the search committee to add 2 full-time faculty, to make Jessica's role a voting member, and 1 part-time faculty. The full-time faculty are self-nominating and will be chosen by...
Also the part-time faculty.
And, sorry, yes, yeah, will be self-nominating, and will be choosing who they are.
It's also important to note that the faculty themselves didn't want there to be a vote because they felt that the engineering faculty would win every time because there are more of them. But what is it? It's going to be, they're going to be self-nominated and then they're going to be interviewed by...
Well, we'll review the nominations and the co-chairs and presumably the whole committee will consider it and make a recommendation and then we'll make a selection.
What's the timeline on that?
It's really up to the Student Faculty Senate. We've coordinated with Dan Lepic on that, and I think they sent out the notice. I don't know offhand what the deadline was, but we told them we want to kind of get going reasonably quickly. We've been interviewing search firms. We've not made a selection yet. We looked at a list of firms. We eliminated the firm that was used last time. We have a couple of what we think are very good candidates, particularly to present us with non-traditional options. We would want to cast a fairly wide net. But that's basically where we are. So we really are at the beginning of the process. We've not defined any criteria. That's why conversations like this are of interest. Johnny has, I think, had conversations with, I know he's had conversations with the dean, and I think also with the faculty, with the deans, and asked them, for their input as to what they'd be interested in. They've had some thoughtful and evolving thoughts. But that's entirely where we are.
And just for some broader context, we're again going to be out of this space by the end of middle of the week this week. But a small group of us had also approached Johnny Taylor. Jeff had recommended we call him up, and we also have been speaking to Bill May about how the community could also contribute informally to holding more dialogues like this that could help inform that process. So I know it's not a formal part of what you're outlining, but it is just something that we thought we could do just to keep ourselves informed about the progress that's being made or just the different things that are happening.
Yeah, I think we certainly contemplate, and the search firms that we talked to certainly said you're going to have a dialogue, you're going to have to talk to the various constituencies. We'll be definitely having more like this that we will initiate. By its nature, the search itself has to be done on a somewhat confidential basis, because you've got people who have reasonably prominent positions, and if it gets out publicly that they're out shopping, they're committing professional suicide in their current position. So we're gonna have to honor that. You know, at some point, we may get down to a couple of finalists, and then we may, with their permission, broaden meetings and stuff with students, faculty, alumni. But you know, we're going to have to play that by ear as the process proceeds.
And who the candidate is? They may
Yeah, no, that's right, Rob. It's really going to depend on them. And you know, because some people may say, look, if it's public, I'm not even going to put my hat in the ring. We've been told that. There are others who don't care, but there are a lot of people, you know, be they presidents of other colleges, be they corporate executives, be they people in think tanks, are going to say, you know, if it gets out that I'm looking, I'm dead. And we've got to respect that.
All right, I guess we can open it up to questions. Anybody want to go first?
Sorry, we don't have to have more to report, but.
I mean, when you say non-traditional, I'm curious, like, what you mean, because I know John Shed was, like, relatively non-traditional from just, like, the fact that he wasn't an administrator. So, like, are there specific things that you're, like, specific qualities that you're
Actually,
he was actually
he was a provost at Tufts.
Yeah, right. So he was
like,
a
that was
paradigmatic
actually
traditionalist.
a profoundly traditional pick.
Yeah.
I think the means of choosing were non-traditional.
But no, I think what that means is you might look outside academia.
Right.
You know, and you know, that has pluses and minuses. There's a whole controversy. We've been talking about this University of Iowa now. They just picked some guy who was a consultant at IBM who has, I think, no academic credentials whatsoever, other than teaching part-time at Harvard Business School. And the question is, how is this guy going to understand the academic dialogue?
Which, by the way, is also true of past presidents of Cooper Union, right? You know, Jay Island had no education background,
Nor did George.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and that, and again, just being careful of choosing my words, that was the great irony that you all may not recall this, but I was not on the search committee. But when Jamshed was chosen and it was announced, I can't tell you how many faculty members came over to me and said how great it was that we had an academic who kind of understood things. But you know, this is
so
a lot of unintended consequences.
I think from my perspective, the only conclusion to draw from the last couple of presidents we have is that picking somebody with an academic background is it's guarantee of nothing. Picking somebody who doesn't have an academic background is a guarantee of nothing. It doesn't seem to correlate either way with performance. So.
What might be,
Sorry, no, go ahead.
what might be the specific role of the president that we find next? I know that generally when I ask this question, I'm told that the president's role is largely to do with fundraising. That's a lot of the work that the president does, but is that going to carry on, or is there going to be like a different kind of alignment of responsibilities for the next president?
For me, so I'll speak personally, and I speak partly. I'm a professor at MIT. I deal a lot with the administrative aspects there, and have a little bit trying to bring a little bit of that to the table in this. For me personally, I think that the president has three broad responsibilities. One is indeed fundraising, and it is non-trivial. And the difference between schools that have survived, and I think it's something like 50 plus universities that have gone bankrupt in the last 10 years. Some of the differences between schools that have survived and schools that haven't have been the ability of presidents to raise massive amounts of money. So that is definitely one of the roles of the president. That's one of them. There's another role that's broadly administrative, and that's everything from dealing with everything from health insurance policies to union negotiation, everything that is involved in the day-to-day business of running a school, which is a lot. And then the third thing is broadly cultural. The third thing is basically defining what does it mean to be there as a student, as faculty. What does it mean from an educational perspective? What does it mean in your day-to-day experience of that? For me, the president of the university is responsible for those three things. They're quite different from each other. I'm hard-pressed to think quickly of anybody who's really good at all three of those things. It's a really hard job to do well. So I don't know if I've misstated anything.
The question that
Go ahead.
The question that arises from your response is about the communication of day-to-day. What strategy do we use to make sure that there is communication, and what happens with John Shedd, where he kind of pulls himself off so everyone doesn't happen again?
It's not a strategy, it's a question of getting the pick right.
Yeah.
And I think we've all said that it's critically important that we get this pick right. We're really mindful of that. But no matter what institutional or bureaucratic or procedures you put in place, it's going to depend on the individual.
Okay.
You can legislate all you want. It's going to depend on people to be able to read. It's going to depend on the individual.
My question is that historically, the president has done the job of the president and provost, and only recently was the job split in half. Are you looking to hire someone that will do both jobs, or will only do one and then hire a provost to do the other half?
There was historically, there had been a provost some years ago. We are not looking to hire a provost because we don't have a budget for it.
I said the provost would have been to be the president's purview, not the board.
Correct, but well, it's the board's in terms of a budget, but given the situation we are in, most presidents would like to have a provost because it frees them up to do the fundraising job. But a provost is another position and needs an admin and everything else, and so at this point we're not contemplating a provost. It's recommended by middle states as part of the accreditation that we have a provost, but we've not done it because we're mindful of budgetary constraints.
Question. Is this time the way the contract to the new presidents will be any different than the past president in terms of like salary, compensation, or benefit, and also like in terms of his probation period? Anything would be set up differently in terms of the contract?
We haven't gotten that far yet, but I dare say you're not going to get anybody to come here on a probation period.
Right.
No serious person can come and take this job who you want on a probation period. They are going to want a commitment for a period of years because they're going to leave, presumably, a decent position.
Yeah.
But we've not begun to negotiate a contract.
If I can, let me add a little bit. First of all, I appreciate where that question comes from, right? The sensibility behind it. I want to just add to what Rich said. This, for anybody who is really qualified to do this, this is not necessarily a super sexy position. Okay, like this is it's a profoundly meaningful one. It's a noble one. It's an important one. It may be the most ambitious thing that person ever does in their life, and it may be the most important thing that they do. But it's not sexy. It's coming into a very troubled environment, financially, culturally, et cetera, et cetera. Adding on top of that the kinds of things that you would want to see, like, and we want to make sure that you're really up to this, and we want to make sure that you're really cool with everybody here, is probably one step beyond what anybody that we would want to come here could possibly stand, right? Just as in the process of arriving, the bar is already pretty high.
But I just want the search committee to recognize that, like the new president should also recognize the student, especially the last two classes who are admitted here, they also recognize this is not the sexiest place to be in right now. Right. Students here are committed, so I'm sure like the body, student body and faculties expect, we look for a president who can also committed to this place and you understand. I'm sure you understand why I have this question.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
So I want you to also consider that.
But I think, we have heard already from the search consultants, and we've said, do you think we can get someone who is, a good and capable person? And they have, to a person, said it's going to be a heavy lift. People are aware of what has gone on here. No matter what you may have thought of him, John Kidd had really stellar academic credentials. And the fact that he went down here gets around in academia, irrespective of what we think, it carries some cred in academia. So I think Kevin characterizes it quite correctly that, we're going to have to vet this person and, we're going to look, one of the things we realize is the person's got to have a high emotional intelligence quotient. And that's clearly going to be a very important element in what we consider.
Even higher than the last president, who we are not allowed to disparage. Okay? Even higher.
I'm not, you are.
You're right.
That was the shock.
But no, I think, as I said, he had very serious academic credentials, but, this is not science. This is an art. This is a hard pick, and, even with the best of intentions, things can go wrong. But we are really, one of the things we're looking for with the search consultant is someone who's not just going to stamp out an everyday roster, someone who's going to give thoughtful questions.
The search consultant might want to leverage the fact that the Attorney General just called us the national treasure.
It's going to be meaningless.
Right. From a search consultant's perspective, talking to a potential candidate and using the phrase Attorney General is not, it's not sexy. It's never going to be sexy. The National Treasure Anonymous. I think you're good.
Jessica's running it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Will there be an opportunity for potential candidates to interact and speak with some constituents of the community, not just the people on the search committee, but so they can understand who they will be leading in terms of as a potential?
Well, that's what we said, and that's part of the process, and we have to play it by ear. I think early on we're going to have a bigger list, and when we get down to finalists, I think the expectation would be to try and do that. We'll have to figure out a way to manage that consistent with concerns about confidentiality. But I would certainly think it would not. You can't hire somebody who's never been here, who's never interacted with people. Who, if all they're relying on is what they read in the newspaper, they're not coming.
And also, it's a good indication too. If a candidate doesn't want to come here, that says something. So.
I guess what it comes down to is finding a safe way for them to come here, and which doesn't, risk any sort of their standing.
No, exactly. We'll work with them and the search consultant and the community and try and do that with the faculty and the students. There are ways that this has been done, but we're gonna that part of the process is a ways off, and we're gonna play it by ear.
Considering you don't have time to waste for the search of a new president, is there a deadline that you guys have?
Our target would be to have someone in place for the next academic year. The expectation is this kind of search takes anywhere, from 6 to 12 months. And, our hope is that we'll get the search consultant on board in the next several weeks, get the committee fully constituted, and then, we've got to put together questions and have a dialogue. And part of that, in response to the previous question, before the candidates even come in, part of that is having the search consultant meet with the constituency. So the search consultant certainly can do that, and it's going to be our mouthpiece in a way to all these candidates. So they're certainly going to do that.
I think they would want to.
Yeah.
We urge them to, come and listen and pose questions and what have you. If they don't have a better idea, then they can, look at the pool and help make a, selection.
I have a question, just in terms of we had talked with the Committee to Save Cooper Union here, their team, and they mentioned that this is kind of a transitional time for the board. Over the next year and next couple of years, the board is going to look really different as people are term limited off and new members are added. And when we talked with Bill May and students here yesterday, he also mentioned that with the Attorney General regulations, the next 8 years are also a transitional period where we'll be walking a line between trying to get back to free, but also having to negotiate paying the bills, accepting new tuition, paying students, while also espousing this ideal that we're trying to get back to. So when you mentioned the potential candidates reading the news and forming an opinion about Cooper, I wonder about how the current board is determining the factors of a president when the board might be in transition and basically, the thing about the newspapers is that, like, when you mentioned that they would look at the Attorney General and kind of be scared off from the position, I don't think that that's a position that I've heard held in the community. I think it's actually rhetoric of the old administration. For example, a lot of the news in the New York Times and stuff is actually really positive. Like Carol said, it's like, this is a national treasure. This community really cares. But basically that narrative has been completely absent from the website, from the official communications. Sorry to ramble, I see your confused expression.
What's the question?
Yeah, I guess my question is that it seems to me like an old board is about to find a president that's about to take on a new long-term commitment. So I wonder about the communications, because what I hear is kind of old rhetoric.
You wonder about the communications of what?
Sorry, I don't know if it's clear, but it just seems like what I'm hearing about. It's basically a fear-based thing that no one wants to take this position. It's unsexy. I think a lot of people that I've talked to disagree that it's actually a really exciting place to be in terms of shaping a college.
Okay, so what I said was, it's a noble ambition. It's an important thing. It's probably the most important thing that whoever comes here will ever do. It is nobody who reads the newspapers or whatever it is that we read instead of newspapers. Nobody who reads is going to confuse the position of President of the Union with a cakewalk. That means that many people who might, for example, have a choice about what institution they would want to run might choose one that is not engaged with the Attorney General of the state of New York. That doesn't mean that we can't get the best person for this job. It doesn't mean that the rhetoric around this is fear-based. It means that it's a difficult search. It means that there are easy searches and there are difficult searches. This is a difficult search.
You have to understand, everyone who will come into this pool is going to know. And if they want to put their name in the pool, they're going to want to be here.
Yeah.
With everything that is going on.
Right.
Just like everyone who went to Cooper and is at
That's
Cooper,
right.
they want to be here. So those people who are going to be in that pool, we're going to have to look at, because we need a good fit. Because we can't have what we have. All right?
We've heard many times over the past 4 years that the way the board and the president of the school are structured is that the president is the point of contact between the board and the students, faculty, and the rest of the school. And it's not just theoretical that that's problematic. Like, John Shedd has proven that that is a problematic way to set up the position of the president and the board of trustees. And in general, I would say that it's not sufficient to have an easily exploitable position and rely on finding the right person to fit in it, who's an inherently wonderful person and would never exploit it. So to formulate that into a question, would the Board of Trustees consider the restructuring of the position itself of the board and the president and the rest of the school in ways that make the position more robust so that we don't have problems like we've just had?
To change it from its current structure to what?
To something where the Board of Trustees cannot say, oh, well, we didn't hear that the president had told us something else, when that may not in fact be true what you're getting from the president.
So what would that structure look like?
It might involve regular community meetings. It might involve direct communication between the Board of Trustee and, for example, the deans or the faculty.
Okay. You stop me if I say the wrong thing, but I don't think that the president is in. How did you open it? You said that the president is in the role of being between the Board of Trustees and the school.
Right.
Okay, that's not what I understand the president to be. The president runs the school. Okay. I think that this has become profoundly confusing at Cooper Union in ways that it's not confusing at most other universities where nobody, I'm at MIT, I don't know the name of one of the trustees. I have no idea who they are, I've never met them. I never will meet them. Same thing at a lot of other schools. The reason I believe that has become so confusing that it could lead to that take is in part because the divide between the community and the administration required what I would characterize as policing. And that policing was left to the trustees. Okay? That doesn't mean that the trustees are setting out to be in the role of administering the school. It means that in a divide between the president and the community, the trustees have to figure out what to do. Okay? But that divide shouldn't be there in the first place. And that divide is not the default state. And that divide is not what we should plan for. The divide is something that we should prevent from happening in the first place. Okay? So the role of the president is to run the school. The role of the trustees is to, in proper, when everything works, to support that. To support that. Not to oppose that, not to police it, not to pass something down for the president to do. It's certainly not why I'm there, and I don't think it's why any of the trustees who are there. Do I misstate anything there?
It's well stated. There are mechanisms that we've developed to have a dialogue. We have the quarterly meetings that we've instituted with the ad chairs. We now have, we'll rejuvenate in accordance with its charter, the quarterly meetings between the executive committee, the student faculty senate, and the chair of the board before the board meetings. And so this will be a dialogue. I think Kevin's right. I think when you get into a dysfunctional situation as we have had, and you have everyone running to individual trustees, you really get a totally dysfunctional environment. And that's a symptom of the dysfunction, right, rather than a proper organization.
Yeah, or the plan for an organization.
I don't think you really answered the question of Evan's question.
Okay.
It's, right now the structure is set up and it allows these things to happen, this kind of chaos to happen. What Evan is asking is, have you guys ever considered restructuring this problematic structure in order to prevent this to happen? What you're relying on is a new candidate that can please everyone to prevent this to happen. But nothing is perfect, it can go wrong again. And you know, we don't have another quarter to miss. I remember vividly, 1 quarter, 3 months in the school since John is here, the school turned to chaos within 3 months.
Yeah.
So do we have another quarter to miss?
So the question is, and I think this is your question too, is the way to address that something that can be addressed structurally? Me personally, I don't think so. I don't think that in the same way that I watch the GOP debates, which is, I don't look at that and think, what the problem is? The problem is, 3 branches of government. That's not the solution to 11 people on the stage. It's not the solution to what frightens me about the premise of one of them being in charge of the United States, right? The problem doesn't, and I can't, in my mind, address that problem by rethinking what presidency means. I have the same fears that you have, and that you have about what could happen based on what has happened. I personally don't believe that structure is the answer to that.
From my point of view, though, what did happen with the past president is that whether or not it was because of structure, we did get caught in a structure where only the board of trustees can say, let's take this president out. And the board of trustees is only listening to the president.
Okay, so what would be an alternative? Well, the board of trustees is not only listening to the president. That I would disagree with you strongly. I can say for myself personally, I talk to a lot of fucking people all the fucking time. Okay? Like, if there's anybody that has any trouble reaching my ears, that's on y'all. All right? And there's a lot of ways that the trustees are in constant contact with the community here in ways that are not true of any other school.
But Kevin, I have to take issue with some of the way you're framing things. It seems a little aggressive, but I just want to say, I don't think the fact that you don't know the trustees at MIT is necessarily a good thing. I think it might work for MIT.
Maybe.
It might work for MIT, which is that I can acknowledge that's a functioning system there. But my concern here, having that continually with our small community, is what will work here. And I think to Evan's point, we are in a transitional period, and I think when we've met with Bill a few times here in different arenas, he talks a lot about political fears. I think I think one way to do that is to start by naming them, and not necessarily to expect a group like this to have immediate answers of alternatives, because that's the type of stuff we're trying to generate. To make distinctions about what's a cultural change, what's a structural change, what does it mean, and people might not know on the spot. But the question is, in my mind, the question is more: is that model that's functioning at MIT, is that what we can replicate here? If so, how do we get to that? If it's not, then we should talk about what it is and how to get to that. Because I think that might work there. I think I've seen other variations of it's a spectrum. It's just a spectrum with different variables. And so for us, I've seen Scott Lerman has kind of distilled 3 questions that I don't have on me right now, but he has distilled 3 questions that I think need to be discussed broadly within the community about Cooper's core purpose and how if we can all come to an agreement on that, then we can begin to move forward in a generative way. And my thought is someone else had made a point earlier, maybe it was to Casey's point, is about or maybe it was to Robert's point, the candidates that will put their names in the ring want in some way to be here, whether or not they know fully what that means. But I think that there's work that we can do as a community to kind of also get rid of some of the fear that they might have by showing as a community that we're receptive to someone coming in. I think that that's something there's a lot of ambiguity that coming out of the Attorney General investigation, coming out of the lawsuit, coming out of the actions and stuff, people might not understand the state of things, and it's not clear. And I think Evan's point is that it's not clear whether or not a new president would only be the only person in communication, because obviously we have student reps, obviously we're going to have alumni trustees, but that's not happened yet. So it's more about having a clarified structure and talking about what we are receptive to and what we want to get to. It's not a question, it's just I'm hearing a lot of things. I think we're all saying similar things, but there's a different way to frame it or something.
If you want to pull those 3 points, they're out there.
It's another forum. Yeah, I think that I think it could be useful for us to think about what are the types of forums and dialogues that will happen via the search form, and what are the types of conversations and dialogues that we as a community can have that can help facilitate those. And at the previous think tank right before this, we were talking with a broad group of students from all 3 schools about what are the barriers to entry in those conversations, what's making it hard for people to participate, what do they know and not know, what will make people come out, and that's different work. That's not work that a search firm can do. That's work that we have to do within the community to resolve some of the long-standing issues that were long-standing from before the last administration. It's not like it wasn't John Shed that did that. It was like all sorts of things. So there is a nuance to that that I think that we can do is completely irrespective of a search committee. That's the type of work that we've been doing in this space, is to see what needs to happen regardless. Like even if we weren't looking for a new president, what is the work of the community now to help alleviate it, so we're not, so that a new president, when you say that a president comes in and like they have to have those 3 points, it's like I would be fearful to put the entirety of the fundraising burden on a president. We need to have, and I've heard that we need to wait until a new president is in place to get
Nobody's suggesting that the entirety.
Yeah, not the entirety, but I know at most schools that's kind of how it happened. That's just normally how it happens. I know that it's not like, you know.
To be very honest, it's not the president who's going to save the school.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay? It is the alumni and friends and the community who's going to help bring about a change in the school. And it's not going to happen in 3 years. It's not going to happen in 5 years. It's going to happen over a very long period of time. So you have to, we have to gather. And even though the president, whoever that person, he or she may be, he's only, or she, he or she, will only be here either 5 years or 10 years, but it's going to take a long time. And, we just need to get someone who's going to be able to help heal, help project, and help bring in that part of that money. That's really what it comes down to.
I was just wondering, in terms of answering their questions about getting president and in 3 months the whole place goes to hell, you are going to have 2 voting student representatives now, and you're going to have faculty observers, and you're going to have our alumni trustees and even more alumni trustees. So isn't that something you could leverage to get more feedback from what's going on very quickly?
If you frame the role of the trustees as police for the president, yes.
But at least it would allow you to be informed about what's going on the ground.
It has that effect as well, but relative to the question of president, the trustees need to be well informed, period.
Yes.
Just to do a good job as trustees. That's just the bottom line. I think there's a lot of things that the board can do better, is doing better, and has been forced to do better, and will do better. Like, I think that the idea that the board will have a better sense of what's going on it's not a given because everything's rainbows and unicorns, but it's at the end of a long process. I think broadly, the board is in much better touch with what's going on. Relative to the search for a president, I think that the composition of the Presidential Search Committee is one that is thus far doing a good job of seeking to represent all constituents as best as is possible within a system of representation. But that the trustees need to be better informed in order for the president to do a better job, I think is not, that's not the goal of having better informed trustees. The goal of having better informed trustees is to have better informed.
I don't think it's to help the president do a better job. I think there's some frightened people there.
Right, but okay, and that fear. Okay, so let me try saying it. The fear that is maybe not wholly articulated or whatever is, what if we get a despot, right? Like, what if we get a horrible person as the president? We all thought they were fine, and they're not, and what do we do? There are structures in place within the board which which is now very different than it was a couple years ago, structurally and culturally, to deal with that. I don't think that you could have a board that I find it hard to imagine a board that is better equipped to get a sense of what's going on the ground in order to play that role of police if a despot comes to power. Outside of despots coming to power, I don't think that the board has a strong role in shaping what the president does.
Can you tell us what those structures are that you just mentioned?
In the end, the board could, for example, choose to end the contract of the president.
I have a question.
Right.
You talked multiple times about the trustee should be informed, and do you think in our current structure, well, not the structure, but in the current role of the secretary of the board and the chief of staff, which is the same person right now, has a conflict of interest to what you were just saying regarding to the information flow? Let me put it straightforward. Do you think it's a problem when Lawrence is both under the president as chief of staff and according to the organization above the president as secretary of the board?
He's the secretary. He's not a trustee.
He's not a
He's not a trustee, but
He doesn't vote on anything.
Yeah, he doesn't
I don't
control the
particularly listen
information.
to him.
He controls no information to the board. The board gets the information.
He's a dude in the room with a laptop.
But he makes twice as much as any hour.
That is super fucked up. But has nothing to do with this discussion.
But during he facilitated 5 years ago when was it 5 years ago, 4 years ago, when the search committee tried to find new candidates and start to host forum to get the student and faculty's opinion on what a candidate is supposed to be. Lawrence was the person to facilitate that forum.
When you say facilitate, it means he schedules it. He does so at the instruction of the search committee, and he answers to the search committee. He has no independent authority.
I don't think we have to worry about what happened, who's going to do it. I think we have to think about what's coming up and how we're going to handle that. So whether Lawrence is doing it or someone else is doing it really doesn't matter. I want this conversation to think about the future, okay, and not about the past. So let's try to keep that in mind.
But I think his question was about the future.
We are saying basically what I get is that he thinks Lawrence is in control of some kind of communication between the outside or the us and the board, and that's not the case. It's not the case. Now, if you're concerned about his salary, that's not the purview of this discussion. Okay.
That's all. I didn't bring that up. What I'm bringing up is the conflict between the two different roles he has in this.
But that, again, you may feel like he has a conflict, okay? But this is not the place to talk about Lawrence's positions, okay? This is about the search for the presidency.
Or let me try saying it a different way. The influence and impact of Lawrence on the actions and choices of the President's Search Committee is zero. Okay. I don't know what it's been in the past. I don't know what you think it is, but his impact on the way that we're doing things, what we will do, and how it gets done is zero.
That's a fair characterization. He answers to the co-chairs. They direct it. He coordinates it at their instruction, not the independent. He has no independent authority.
So, moving away from the topic of Lawrence and all that, you mentioned that, in your opinion, the board is structurally and culturally different now. Could you elaborate on how that it is different?
I can. I'm happy to. I would also like to make sure that this evening is about the presidential search.
Okay.
So how do you want to handle that?
How's it?
Well, let me make my assessment, okay? Since I just came on board in December, okay? So many things have happened that has changed the nature of the board, okay? We have resigned, John Shed resigned, the 5 people that supported him resigned. The makeup of the board is going to change completely with the new alumni trustees, the observers, the 2 student trustees. You know, I think it is so totally going to be so totally different. And it already
revolution is coming.
I'm sorry?
Revolution is coming.
I'm not saying it's a revolution. I think it's an evolution.
And by the way,
that's my feeling.
No, but by the way, I get why it's really hard to imagine or believe that it's different, because it looks more or less like a box, and it's not clear what is happening inside of it, and it's not clear how to figure out what's happening inside of it. But it produces evidence of what's going on inside of it. The board, 3 years ago, was chaired and spoken for by a chairman who, in a forum not so very different from this, said that the basic problem with Cooper Union was that the alumni were a failed investment. That's not something that you would hear now. And not just because
Factually incorrect.
What's that?
It's factually incorrect.
It's not only because it's factually incorrect, right? But also because there's nobody who believes it. There's, look, there were, by the end, there were 5 people on the board who were contentious with many things that I believed. And those 5 people are gone. It's also true that a lot of the trustees who you might say made decisions that you don't agree with or feel were wrong left when it got hard, left when it stopped being fun, left when it stopped being somehow helpful on a CV or whatever the fuck it was that motivated them to do it. They left. A lot of them. A lot of them left, some of them stayed, and then they left. The people who have stayed on the board are the people who have been through probably the least rewarding set of troubles and tribulations, except insofar as they care immensely about the outcome. So I would say that culturally, the board that remains from those who left is a board that actually cares about what is going on. It is also true that it's about to change structurally in all the ways that are outlined by the state of New York, to include really a lot of people that are generally not on boards, and it's great that they're on this board. And like, for me personally, great, good. So like, that's only good. It's structurally different, it's culturally different. That's how I would answer that. The overall tenure of the conversations that the board has with itself, as well as with the community, is different. If you disagree, I'd like to hear it, but for me, this is very different than when I joined the board, whatever it was, 2 years ago. All right, it just is, it's just different.
Yeah, I'm just interested in hearing how you characterize the change. I think you answered it.
I have more of a statement than a question, and it might relate to that. But all of us have spent the past 5 years desperately trying to figure out what the Cooper Union is and then imagine what it can be. And we've done a lot of work in that field. And so now that we're at this point, it's very frustrating and unsatisfying to hear the board say again, don't worry, we'll take care of it. This isn't your problem. We have it under control. You don't need to think about the governance of the school because we've been thinking about the governance of the school.
I just want to interpret. What makes you think that this board has said that?
What I'm hearing is, no, really, we've got it figured out this time. The board's different. You don't have to worry about it. But it seems like it's changed from one black box that we don't have input into that spits out education into a black box that spits out education that we've told has a different mechanism inside. But we don't really want that. Like, we're in this room because we have been learning so much about the way that the school runs, and we know that we know about the Cooper Union in ways that trustees clearly did not know about the Cooper Union before.
Which trustees?
The trustees that thought that tuition would be a good idea.
What are the trustees who are there now?
I do not know the names of any trustees except Deborah.
Okay.
But
Look,
I'm trying to voice a feeling that I think is important for the board to hear. So I don't really have a solution for you, but I want it to be out there.
Let me say that those feelings that you have, I think a lot of the trustees have. A lot of the trustees are alumni. May not be alumni trustees like Kevin and myself, but there are a lot of people who feel that way. Okay? And those who didn't are not there. Okay? So we're here. We're here. All right? So that's a big difference. I mean, when the last presidential search happened, I didn't hear anything. You know, I was on the CUAA. I was, somewhat involved, but I didn't hear much of anything.
I mean, you surely recognize something slightly perverse in bringing a bunch of trustees into a meeting with a bunch of people from the community and saying that nothing has changed. Because that didn't used to happen. Okay? I've been a student, I've taught there, I've been part of Cooper Union for over 20 years. This is not normal. This is not how it goes. All right? The fact that we're here to hear this is because it's different.
I don't mean to put you on the defensive, but the reason why I'm saying something like this is I guess I'm trying to say that some of the things that we're hearing are, even if a lot of things have changed, there are things that aren't changing, and we're hearing that, and I don't know, I'm not sure if you're seeing the places where we ask a question for a specific reason, and if you give us an answer to say, no, everything's all right, then maybe we need to further that conversation a lot more so we understand the way the structure is running, or we need to, mutually consider more radical options, because that's what we would like to do.
4 years ago, the trustee put their bet on the new president. We don't want you to put your bet on another president. We want you to come up with a solution that is not put all your chips into one person.
Okay. So let me try to distill something down, and you tell me if I've got this wrong or not. I think that what different people here are voicing in different ways, and you tell me if I've got this wrong, is that it is impossible to come up with a good solution to keep Cooper Union afloat using systems of governance that are currently running. Is that what you're saying?
I would be willing to accept that.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I think that we have an opportunity to make it a lot better.
Okay. So if that's the assertion, just say that personally I disagree, and that it is often the case in all forms of regime change at all scales to change structure where the structure isn't what did the damage. There have been wholly catastrophic presidents of the United States. I don't care which side you lean on, you must surely agree that there has been at least one president of the United States that has brought ruin upon the nation. The solution to that is not to end the democratic institutions of the United States or to change them substantively. The answer is get a different president. The answer is to vote. The answer is to be engaged.
But also, I think there's a lot of changes that are going to be coming to the community that we haven't even seen yet. And so, having this discussion, even in a few months from now, once the consent decree is in functioning order, my sort of change of view on this because of the new avenues that it creates in terms of having a lot of involvement that hasn't happened yet, and so you can't see it as something that is like effectively sort of changing the system. You know, in terms of faculty involvement and alumni involvement and student involvement, more so than we've ever had before, and a lot more communication on our parts between everybody in the community. And I know that Bill's trying really hard to work on that, even if he's not going to be the president in the future, and Christian was working really hard on the student side to bring that into action, and the trustees kind of coming closer and closer as we ask them to hear us directly as community members. So it's begun, but I think it also is going to continue to change in a positive direction.
In 150 years of Cooper Union, there was never a student in the board meetings until 2 years ago, 3 years ago, yeah, 2 years ago.
I came up.
Okay, and having, for example,
And then she was just representing.
right, that's right, and that's a good point. But even the simple fact of having a student in the room really changed what happens in the room. Now, which is to Devorah's credit, now there's going to be 2 student trustees.
I would just have to disagree with that as a fact, because Victoria and I
It didn't change what happened in the room? Is that the fact that you're disagreeing?
No, about the unprecedentedness of a student representative. We talked to Tomashi, who was here a couple of years before Jamshed got here, and so during Campbell's administration, Tomashi was on student council and said that she was in board meetings from time to time.
From time to time, but not seated on the board.
Yeah, but I think also looking at other colleges, I think it's not fair to say that what's happening here is unprecedented when
I said it hasn't happened in 150
With all due
years.
respect to my fellow students who are making these points, now is not the time to talk about structure. This entire meeting is here so we can talk about the Presidential Search Committee. And if I may, I'd like to return to that point of topic so we can stop shitting on our trustees who were willing to come and talk to us today, and instead have the productive conversation about what we came here to have productive conversation about. To that end, I'd like to ask, what if we don't find a new president by the next academic year? On Wednesday, Bill May had said, this is not a kind of institution in which we can have a rented president, someone to act as interim that we bring in for just a year. And then not immediately after, and then perhaps 15 minutes afterwards, he said that might be the case if we don't find a president who would fit, even though that wouldn't be the ideal solution. So what would we be looking at as happening if we don't find a president?
I just don't think that was a nice redirection. I just want to point out that Victoria left the room, and I wasn't trying to shit on the trustees, but I was actually just clarifying a fact. So
I hope you don't feel that, you know.
no, I just wanted to clarify because I
you don't
thought
feel like
it wasn't a
shit.
nice redirection.
Nobody has to worry about my feelings. However, I do agree with returning to the subject at hand.
We've not considered what will happen in a year. I think our hope and our expectation is that we get this done. If it looks like, and we made a deliberate decision not to bring in an interim president for exactly the reason you noted, because we felt it was good that Bill knows the culture at Cooper, that he's established how to deal with it. On the other hand, Bill's going to have a lot on his plate. He's got to also support the Free Education Committee, which is going to make a serious effort and a serious analysis. He's got to do a lot of things in terms of reconfiguring the cost structure if we're going to cut costs. So to expect that to continue, you know, he said he can take them both on board for this interim period. To expect that to continue may be too much, but again, we're not going to go into this with preconceived notions. I think we'll look at it and see how it's progressing. If we and we'll know reasonably quickly if we have a robust candidate pool and people who offer possibilities. We won't necessarily know whether we'll get there, but you know, if we go out and we get an empty letterbox, we'll know we got to stick it in alternative direction. But if we get a good, robust group of candidates, we'll proceed with that, because I think that's best for the school to kind of move it forward and not be in this transitory situation.
I think it's true that we want to have a very good fitted president. I don't think we are going to go and do what we did with the last president. Okay, there are going to be happens when we will, you know, which happened last time, which we offered, you know, and they declined. That might happen. I don't know. But we're much more open than I think we were then. At least since I'm on it, I hope I'm going to be much more open about it and being part of the, you know, the committee, Free Education Committee. I'm going to be sure that they understand what they're coming into, because I don't think John Ship did, and you know the history there. So I really don't think we're going to go that direction.
So I guess we can all agree that we're in a pretty critical time. Bill May has stepped in and has started to make some changes, and kind of outlined, well, not he himself, but has gathered some goals that, like, you know, people in the community have outlined they like in their respective schools. And do you have the expectation that the president that you choose is going to continue with the work that Bill May does in the interim, or do you think that you expect to have someone who's going to come and kind of work, kind of move forward in? Do you expect the new president will pick up where Bill May leaves off, or do you think that he might come in with the expectation that he or she, is going to take the school in his own kind of direction?
Yeah, I don't think we know where Bill May's going to leave off. I think, you know, he's an acting president. We're kind of moving along, and we're not going to make any radical steps in the interim, because we have to heal the community, which we've talked about, and get past this period of mistrust. Bill is getting inputs. I would think anyone we would bring in who is going to have this emotional intelligence that we've talked about and this openness is going to listen to what Bill is going to remain an integral part of his cabinet. Bill is really, you know, effectively number 2 is the CFO and very interim. So any president who would come in and just disregard everything Bill's heard would not be somebody we'd pick. But, you know, we don't know, you know, as an acting president, Bill is not going to suddenly set out, you know, where Cooper's going for the next 5 years. That's not his role. But I think he's doing a good job of listening to people and making people feel listened to, and of being accessible, which is one of the things he did before he was president, and why we selected him for the position.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think it's a good question in that Bill's essential role at this point is to heal. His essential role is to get us past all the horribleness of the past. The president, whoever they are, that's going to come in, ideally, perhaps necessarily, needs to have a real vision for what it's going to be. Otherwise, it's not going to work, right? Like bringing in, there's a profound difference that's often articulated in any organization. There's a profound difference between managers and leaders. And the president that is going to come will need to be a leader. I'm not saying that Bill May isn't capable of being a leader, and he is leading, but primarily, at the moment, it's primarily a managerial transition. Does that make sense to everybody as an overall idea? Do I mischaracterize it? Yeah.
I just have it's probably like a relatively stupid question to ask, but I feel like people ask it all the time, so it's worth bringing up anyways. There's no prospect of Bill May becoming the actual president, right? Because that's
it's a good question.
We haven't precluded it, but he does not have the experience as president. And he has certain strengths. He has other areas where he doesn't have experience. Are we ruling it out? Not entirely, but it is not something where we named him as a trial, but if this works, he'll be there. I think, the expectation is that we probably bring somebody in. We also think, he's done a superb job as CFO. That's something that's increasingly important. that we need them there.
Wait, so Rich, do you think you wouldn't consider non-college presidents as candidates? At least not initially?
No, it's exactly what I said. In the search firm, we're going to look for diversity defined not by race or ethnicity, but by experience. But Bill, in his past experience, has only been in academia. He has only been in a finance function. He has not done the kind of things that we think you would ideally want in a president. So that's, like I said, we're not precluding it, but he is not on, when he took the position, it was not with the expectation that he would be selected. He's expected at the end of his term, he's elected, and he will revert to the CFO role.
For next. Yep.
I just wanted to say, the sense that I got when we heard that the Office of the Attorney General was stepping in, and then when we had the pleasure of having John Leslie speak to, I'm part of the alumni association, the council, was the sense that somebody finally came in on a white horse and said, that's it, enough of this nonsense. Someone is going to come in and just stop the insanity. And, which is great, but we can't rely on somebody coming from above to regulate the school. And I think the question that I'm hearing is, will there be internally created and agreed to checks and balances? So it's not about the trustees policing the president. It's about the community as a whole being able to be heard and being able to exercise certain measures of influence so that you don't have the same pattern. And I can speak from the sense of, if you are teaching a bunch of unruly second graders and they don't listen to you, you have to pull the principal to come in. And that undermines your authority, although often it helps a lot. So it's great that the Attorney General picked up on this and said, okay, we're not going to let this fester, we're not going to let this continue. And until that happened, we were on some kind of weird trajectory to hell. I mean, we know that. The school probably would have just wound up not being a school. It would have been a museum. and a building that somebody rented out. So I think what we're hearing from the students, and this is my concern, is that for 4 years, you didn't just go to college, you had to worry about how your school was run, which is not the job of the students. It's good to be involved. I was on the student council, which was pretty, we didn't have a lot to do, we didn't have to worry about running the school. But the point I'm making is that we can't, even though for 8 years, the Attorney General is committed to watching Cooper Union, watching over us like a soothing balm, you know, we're here, it's like Santa Claus, saying, don't worry, we're not going to let it happen again. That is not going to ultimately make the school be what it should be, considering the level of commitment, passion, talent, and intelligence that comes through these doors. There needs to be means for the kind of thoughtful involvement so that it isn't up to the Board of Trustees to have to be, and I know, Kevin, what you've done, I know how you've communicated, and I know Robert is on the council, etc. We've had, you know, big breakthrough. I think that's what's happened. But I think you have to consider the concerns that this can't be dependent on some outside authority to fix things. We can't be, the person who comes in as the president has to have some autonomy, has to know that she or he will be able to come in, have a vision, and also be able to communicate and not constantly think, well, the Attorney General is watching everything we do, and there's all kinds of, you know, negative history, etc. So I think the sentiment is from the students is that, have you thought about, in terms of not just what the Attorney General has dictated. I mean, the Attorney General set up certain things in place, but that needs to be more than that. It needs to be something that comes from within as well. You know what I'm saying? So it's not down to you. You don't have to be blamed. You don't have to be like you're the bad guys or you're the police. You know, you're policing the president or you're policing the school administration. That should never have to be. So I think that's really what is being expressed here. So I don't think it's putting you on the spot and saying, okay, are you now don't ever let that happen again. That type of thing. So I just wanted to, you know, kind of process what you were saying. And I think when it goes to the alumni, it's the same thing. How do we say to alumni, all right, start ponying up some money. You know, when we are going to do fundraising, we're going to actually try to put a lot of things in place to get alumni back in and to get the donations. So I want to be able to say to them, you might be skeptical, you might be confused, you might not even know what's going on. So I think it would help a lot as well so that we can get the fundraising and, you know, positive, not just the anger or the upset, being upset or being disillusioned or whatever. So people can feel good about donating, you know, even though we've been donating all along. So now we need to know, hey, we were donating all along, let's just, you know, let's not fall off that. So.
I just want to let everyone know that it's a few minutes past 8, but it looks like there might be a few more questions. Octavia,
I have to go.
Someone else.
I have to go, so.
Robert has to go.
I apologize, but, you know, I'm happy to come another time, we arrange it. You know, I'm generally here, so just let me know, okay? But unfortunately, I have to go. Okay? Thanks very much. Thanks for coming.
I should go, but I'll do another 15 minutes.
If we make it a hard stop, I'll stay for 15. I don't know, seriously, guys, I don't live in New York. I gotta go to New Jersey.
I'll just make a 30-second comment to what you said earlier about we cannot do anything radical because we need to heal.
Wait, sorry, Vincent, but Pranav was first
I
and
don't
Octavia
think
was next.
I said that. What I said is that Bill's mandate is not to do anything radical. He is an acting president. I didn't say we cannot do anything radical. We're going to look at that. Now, in response to your point, as much as we wish, we can't wave a magic wand and say everything's fine, and instantly reestablish trust. You know, Carol knows I'm not gonna just hand it to you. I'm not just gonna to placate you or say anything. It's gonna take time, folks, and it's gonna take engagement. And this is the start of it, and this is emblematic of it. But no amount of structure, Kevin has said, is going to change, no matter what we do. And the dialogue that has been had with Chris Cloud and Nils is emblematic of it. It's going to be little steps, and I realize there's impatience. But the problem with that is it doesn't produce anything, and we're just going to have to work on the process and work on the dialogue. And, I told you, Carol, I can't make it happen. I can't promise you things instantaneously. But, the fact that we're here tonight, as I said, Friday night is a major lift to get here. I put in a 90-hour week, folks.
And you're normally out Friday nights doing pretty crazy stuff. Sacrifice is noted.
Don't bet on it. But no, I think that's right. But that's to your point. I didn't say we can't. I said that is not Bill's mandate, and it would be inappropriate for him to do so as an acting president.
All right, so just to put off next on Octavia, then Justin, and I think that'll probably be our 15 minutes unless anyone else has anything else to say.
Mine's really short, so I'll probably fit somebody else in.
Yes,
It was
you can.
supposed to.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be when we were talking about Bill as a candidate. He was here on Wednesday, and I asked him if he wanted to be a candidate or if he was going to put his. And I'll quote what he said. He said, "I don't know if I'm going to put my name in the hat." So just while we're talking about it, just something to keep in mind.
That was your.
That's all I had to say.
I
It was
was
a wrong
asking,
time. So.
why I am asking is Bill May acting as the guy who keeps shit together for a year until we get a new president?
That's not giving him enough credit.
Yeah.
It encapsulizes it, but maybe it's demeaning. We credit Bill, and Bill is looking to do initiatives in consultation, though. But I think to credit what Bill has done is he's consulted him.
Yeah.
So he's available to yourselves, he's available to student trustees. He's also available to us, and so we are having a dialogue. And he'll say, this has been thought about. Here's what I see about it, and I think somebody questioned how the black box is different. I've been on the board for a while, and the idea that the board somehow doesn't ride herd. I mean, all of you are on the JSC and the ad chairs have seen how we've been responsive to some comments that you made, Harrison. That should be evident, right? And, and I think the point I said there was, I follow through on my word, as I have done so. But I think what Robert and Kevin said is that the dialogue in the room now is respectful. Kevin and I go out for drinks and chat about stuff.
True story.
And we do go to cool places. But the key is, and you're not going to agree with every decision we make. I can promise you that. But the answer is that in the room, people are not shouting down dissident views. There is a really thoughtful and respectful conversation. And look, there's legitimacy. As much as you think you've solved everything and you think it's right, there are other viewpoints that are legitimate as well. And the key is to kind of work them through. But, I have to say, somebody commented after the board meeting we had, hey, where was the drama?
Right.
And it wasn't like people were saying yes. There were questions, there were alternative proposals put out. But Monica, Jessica, Devorah, you guys were there. You've seen the difference.
I was like, this is so much better than what.
But I think that's in terms of the black box. That stuff is not necessarily, as Kevin said, you put all structures in place you want. But it's the people who are implementing the structures. And I think, we have an engaged board. The key is we have brought in newcomers to the committees, to the committee leadership. You got people who are really involved. You know, we've got alumni trustee actively involved. You know, Jessica and Monica are going to sit on committees, and you know, I've told them, since they're no longer student reps, they got responsibilities now. They're fiduciaries.
Yeah, good luck with that.
So, but that's the point to your question. I take your point, and you know, we've been puzzling with that, and we are troubled by that. And it would be great, you know, for us to be able to say, look, we don't expect everybody to say, yeah, you know, we blew away the wicked witch, everything's, you know, wonderful. No matter what we put in place, people are going to be doubtful for a while.
Let me just return back. I didn't catch your name. Sorry.
Oh,
Octavia. Okay, sorry. I didn't know. One way to think about Bill as opposed to Bill's role as opposed to the president that we will bring in at some point is Bill is there to think about how to get through the next year in the most responsible way, which is very different than somebody who's thinking about, man, you know, what is the long-term viable future of the institution? Just because, how can Bill do that, right? If he's just there for a year, right? And it's not to say that he has nothing to contribute to that, because actually he has a huge amount to contribute to that. But that's not his job at the moment. His job is not to think about the next 150 years of Cooper Union. It's to get us through, to keep shit together, which again is non-trivial, right? And he's doing a really good job.
But we'll tell him that's his role, to keep the shit together.
All right, so sorry, I forgot. If you guys can like make it quick, we can probably get through both of you.
Okay.
Oh no, he's first.
Oh, sorry.
It's probably closer to the question. Anyways, for each of the trustees, what do you think the community can do to help as part of the process?
This is good. I mean, this is good. I would be interested. You know, I have my answer about what 3 things I want from the president, which is basically administrative, fundraising, and cultural, and that they have to be really good at those 3 things. I'd be interested to hear from everybody else what they think the answer to that is. That would, like, getting that as input would help the, 9 people on the committee to shape what that search looks like.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think that was our expectation tonight, to kind of come and listen to you all as president. And that's, you know, what Johnny has been doing, and Eric been doing, talking to the faculty and talking to the deans. So, you know, we're looking for that input.
And we can set up another one of these. Even though Nonstop will be over, we can still use a great hall or rows or even a classroom, and hopefully get Johnny and Eric here too. And then once the faculty are on, so maybe we'll put that off for a little bit until the committee gets formed. But definitely have. Sorry.
So get like a firm to work.
Yeah, maybe even a search firm depending on when we get them. Yeah, we'll have more of these for sure.
Alright, so my question's kind of along the same lines. We talked about this at the last ad chair meeting with you guys. But in terms of like steps forward, I was kind of wondering like what you two would think would be like the most efficient kind of method to develop like an idea of the community's desires for like traits of a new president, responsibilities of a new president. Like a few ideas we've been putting forward is like trying to send out like a survey or a form to the students and ask them like maybe like bullet points of like would you like how do you feel about these traits, or maybe like keep it open-ended and just try to distill that data down so that we have like a good viewpoint of like how all the members of the community feel.
I wouldn't do it as a survey because it shapes it. But like I don't know. I mean, like one way to do it is like you know, like think about not like in the abstract, but like who is a person that you would want to be the president of Cooper Union, and tell us why. Like an actual person. Okay, and to articulate why, right? And like what makes
cool, didn't know addition to face.
I don't mean it well.
I think we're going to look for that, and we're going to look for those. And I agree with Kevin. If you do a survey, your questions shape the responses. Just another one. We've seen that, but I think the same way Johnny's gone to the deans and given them a blank sheet of paper, and he said, "Tell me what you're looking for in a president." Come back unstructured. Because it doesn't elicit sort of off the cuff responses. It makes you sit down and think about it. And to have to articulate it is going to make you be thoughtful about it. And that's what we want. So we are, as we said, the search committee or the search consultant with us is going to help develop that. And we're going to look for community input on that. Absolutely.
So say that there is a community-backed candidate with the search committee in place, is that a candidate that will still be taken seriously?
Well, we will consider nominations, but we're not going to pick a president by public vote.
But is there a way for them to be part of that? They're not kept out because the search committee didn't find them. I don't know the organization.
I don't think we would exclude anybody who came in by any means. Like however they came in. It's not like they have to come in through the search firm. It's not like they have to come in through any particular door at all. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
All right, so it's 8:15. Thank you guys all for coming.
Thank you guys for organizing this whole event.
And if you have any I'm to Nonstop for the space. And just like Devorah's available, I'm available. Monica's available. If you want to give me that blank piece of paper tomorrow, I'll take it whenever, at any point. Just let us know what you're thinking, and if you have an idea for a new meeting, or where you want it, or what you want it to be about.
Also, let's say you actually have a casual group of people who you end up let's say you just have a few people and you end up talking about this, and you want us to know what was said, maybe if you weren't there, or if it's an impromptu thing and you want us there, that's fine. It doesn't have to be an official forum through the student council or something. It could just be oh, we were in the studio and we ended up talking about this, here are the minutes of our meeting of what we spoke about. That's cool too. It doesn't always have to be a formal thing. It's you guys, you have your own schedules, you have whatever, it's okay. That's another way that we get this information as well. It could just be a Facebook message saying oh, we're here, we're talking, why don't you come?
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm down.
Okay.
Yeah.